State of Latino Entrepreneurship Forum. I am Arturo Cáceres. Oh, okay. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the 7th Annual State of Latino Entrepreneurship Forum. I am Arturo Cáceres, CEO of Latino Business Action Network, LBAN. It is great to see the strong interest in our forum today. We usually have this at Stanford, but obviously for health safety reasons, it's going to be virtual. But it is great to see so many people from across the country joining us live via YouTube. We're a nonprofit organization founded by Stanford Emeritus Professor Jerry Porras and Stanford trustee Victor Arias, who is our chairman. At LBAN, we have a big mission to empower Latino entrepreneurship across the country and partner with Stanford through the Stanford Latino Entrepreneur Initiative, also known as SLAY. We have three main pillars of focus. First is to collaborate with Stanford on foundational research for Latino entrepreneurship. This forum today is focused on that research. The second pillar of LBAN and SLAY is a transformative business scaling program for Latino business owners. There are now almost 900 Latino entrepreneurs that have completed our SLAY Ed business scaling program at Stanford. Our third pillar of focus is building an empowering ecosystem of Latino entrepreneurship. The ecosystem is based on our growing network of alumni, plus a growing network of capital providers and mentors. We are very grateful to Stanford for their partnership and support since the beginning of LBAN. And today we're very excited. We have a full agenda. This forum essentially is segmented into three parts. First, you will hear the research presented by the people that made it happen, Dr. Marlene Orozco and Professor Paul Oyer. Then you will hear a panel discussion moderated by LBAN COO Jennifer Garcia in discussion with entrepreneurs from our SLAY Ed business scaling program. And finally, the keynote of our forum today is a fireside chat between Dean Levin of the Stanford Graduate School of Business and Administrator Guzman of the SBA. In closing my remarks, I want to acknowledge LBAN's lead sponsors, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and the Cerna Foundation. They have been with us for much of our journey, and their support and ongoing partnership have made LBAN and all of our programming possible. We have several other sponsors, and we are grateful to all of our supporters. I will wrap up now and give the forum over to the president of Stanford University, Mark Tessier-Levine. He will then be followed by Stanford Emeritus Professor and founder of LBAN, Jerry Porras. With that, it is my great honor to hand the forum over to President Tessier-Levine. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Stanford President Mark Tessier-Levine, and I'm delighted that you've joined us for today's program. As part of today's meeting, the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative will announce findings from its 7th annual State of Latino Entrepreneurship report. Through this report, our researchers provide deep insights into the opportunities and challenges facing Latino entrepreneurs in the U.S. and show how their success contributes to a stronger national economy overall. The report has helped policymakers, industry leaders, and entrepreneurs better understand how to support and scale Latino-owned businesses. In addition to the annual report, the SLAY Education Scaling Program helps Latino business owners enhance their networks and scale their businesses. Together, the research program and the executive education program provide a model for supporting the success of minority entrepreneurs, one that other universities and business action networks can follow. I want to thank the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative for their long-term commitment to improving our understanding of today's landscape for Latino entrepreneurs and to supporting these entrepreneurs. I'm proud of SLAY's leadership in this space, and I know today's discussions will spark additional insights to further advance this cause. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you, President Tessier-Levine. I also want to give you my personal thanks for your continued support of the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative. You've made a substantial difference in our growth and success, and we really appreciate it. Sadly, I'd like to acknowledge that the passing earlier this week of John Arriaga. John was a significant benefactor and supporter of our efforts from the very beginning of SLAY. I extend my deep condolences to his family. My name is Jerry Porras. I am a professor emeritus here at the GSB and co-faculty director of SLAY. To all of you joining us online, a very warm welcome. We look forward to presenting the key results of our 2021 national survey of over 15,000 Latino and white entrepreneurs. In addition to the research results, you'll hear stories about their experiences from real-life Latino entrepreneurs, as well as policy perspectives from our keynote speaker, SBA Administrator Guzman. Before we begin, I want to first set a context for the research findings and discussions to come. The SLAY Research Program and this forum are part of a larger effort focused on supporting the growth and success of Latino entrepreneurs across the country. I'd like to share the perspective that drove us to create SLAY. Let me start by posing a question to you. Are Latinos an asset or a liability to the U.S. economy? We all know that in a company, a key goal for any successful leader is to increase the size and strength of the business's assets, while at the same time working to reduce the size and scope of most of its liabilities, or possibly completely eliminating them. What if we applied this framework to the way we think about Latinos in the U.S.? Here are a few facts about U.S. Latinos to help us determine if they are assets or liabilities. At the individual level, according to the 2020 census, Latinos make up 19% of the total U.S. population, having grown 23% since 2010. That's about 62 million Latinos in the U.S. today. It's expected that by 2050, Latinos will make up around 30% of the total U.S. population. According to a recent LDC report, in 2019, Latinos as consumers and homeowners contributed over 1.9 trillion to the overall U.S. GDP. In the business arena, there were over 5 million Latino-owned U.S. companies in 2020, with this number having grown at a rate of about 44% in the last 10 years. This growth rate can be compared to just 4% for non-Latino-owned businesses. Put another way, this is a net growth of more than 1.5 million new businesses during the previous decade. The total contribution to the U.S. GDP by Latino-owned businesses is over $800 billion. Adding the individual contribution figure to the business generation figure, the total economic output of U.S. Latinos in 2020 was approximately $2.7 trillion, about 13% of the total $21.4 trillion in the U.S. GDP. If U.S. Latinos were a country, its GDP would be the 7th largest in the world, approximately equal to France, and whose growth rate would be tied for the 3rd fastest of the entire world behind China and India. So today, Latinos as individual consumers and as business owners are making an important impact on the economy of this country. And more importantly, that impact has been growing significantly over the past several decades. Therefore, it behooves us as a country to make sure that this segment of our society is just as prosperous as everyone else. One example of the potentially dramatic effect of Latinos on GDP is in the area of equalizing family incomes. The 2020 Census Population Survey revealed that the median household income for Latinos families was around 29% less than for whites. If Latinos were generating median annual family incomes at similar levels as whites, the impact on U.S. consumption levels would be trillions of dollars per year. Investing in making this happen seems like a wise business decision. Let's consider another area where equalizing prosperity can have an enormous impact: the gap between the average revenues of Latino-owned businesses and non-Latino-owned businesses. If that gap were close to zero, so that the two groups of businesses generate the same average annual revenues, the impact on GDP would be at least $1.5 trillion. Seems to me that it would be very worthwhile investing in ways to help Latino business owners grow their revenues to the point where they match non-Latino-owned businesses. We believe that by these measures, Latinos should be considered an asset to the U.S., one that deserves significant investment to promote its economic growth and impact. This view becomes even more compelling when we face the fact that in just a few decades, 1 of every 3 people in this country will be Latino. As we move into the future, we can see that the economic success of this country will be heavily dependent on the economic success of Latinos, both as individuals and as companies. More specifically, we believe that the economic success of Latinos as individuals can be greatly accelerated by the growth in number and size of Latino-owned businesses. Of these 2 factors, increasing the size of Latino-owned businesses is the key leverage point for accelerating the growth in Latino community wealth. Not only will owners of growing businesses generate more personal wealth that will spread into the communities that they live in, they will also tend to hire more Latinos and promote them to senior management positions at greater rates, all of which eventually will contribute to increased Latino wealth. So let's look more closely at Latino-owned businesses. Although Latinos are quite adept at starting businesses, growing them to be large is another story. Only 3% of all Latino-owned businesses are scaled. That is, if they have annual revenues of greater than $1 million. The comparable number for white-owned businesses is 6%. Considering only employer firms, that is, those that have at least 1 employee beyond the founder, only 9% are Latino-owned, compared to 21% for white-owned businesses. If our country is to enjoy an economically prosperous future, not only must there be many more Latino-owned businesses with greater than 1 million in annual revenues, but, and maybe more importantly, there also must be many, many more very large Latino-owned businesses. Why is size important? Because large companies have a very powerful impact on the economic, political, and social arenas of our country. They shape the lives of all of us in many significant and meaningful ways. Therefore, it's our view that Latinos need to be owning and leading more very large companies. This then is the reason SLAY was created. Put simply, the purpose of SLAY is to strengthen the United States by promoting the development and growth of very large Latino-owned businesses. Now, SLAY is an umbrella organization that brings together in a collaboration the Latino Business Action Network, LBAN, a nonprofit 501c3 organization led by Arturo Cáceres, and the Graduate School of Business's Center for Entrepreneurship Studies, led by Deb Whitman. SLAY's co-faculty directors are Paul Oyer and me. In this collaboration, LBAN develops broad project ideas and then raises the funds needed to implement them. GSB faculty interested in collaborating on a proposed project implements it with funding support from LBAN. SLAY's effort to date can be divided into 3 different thrusts. First is a research effort in which we seek to generate data on the state of U.S. Latino-owned businesses, data that can be used by policymakers in government, business, and academia to make research-based decisions that will promote the success of this segment of our economy. To date, we've conducted 7 annual national surveys of Latino-owned businesses. We've collaborated with other entities, most notably the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, on more focused studies. We've assembled a national group of researchers focused on studying Latino entrepreneurship and published a book of readings titled Advancing U.S. Latino Entrepreneurship, a National Imperative. SLAY's second thrust is an educational program focused on helping scale Latino-owned companies become very large. This is the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative Scaling Program. This program, offered in 2 unique cohorts per year, invites 75 to 80 Latino business owners, specifically CEOs or CEOs, from all over the country and from all industries to participate in a rich experience focused on helping them learn how to scale their companies. We specifically target scale companies, business owners who aspire to build very large companies. To date, we've offered the program to 12 cohorts. With a 92% completion rate, we now have 874 graduate companies from 34 states, Puerto Rico, and DC, employing over 42,000 people with combined annual revenues of over $5.4 billion. And finally, SLAY's third thrust is the development of an ecosystem focused on promoting the growth of Latino-owned businesses. This ecosystem currently consists of over 150 mentors and a network of 50 capital providers who previously participated in the scaling program. A robust network of over 800 of our scaling program alumni connected together through the Mobilize platform. Relationships with other organizations across the country who focus on Latino-owned businesses, such as the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, various Latino-oriented professional development associations, minority supplier organizations, and minority supplier executives within large corporations such as Apple. The LBAN team plays a key role in coordinating and stimulating interactions across the various networks. This ecosystem constantly expands and becomes more robust. So there you have it. That's what SLAY is all about. So now let's turn to the research. I'd like to introduce Professor Paul Oyer, co-faculty director of SLAY, who will kick off the presentation of our 2021 survey findings. Paul.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm thrilled to be part of this event, to present our research findings, and to see the other speakers and the panel. Marlene is much closer to the details of this study than I am, and has really devoted all of her energies over the past year to the report that we are releasing today. So I'm going to let her take you through the details. I just wanted to introduce some of the themes and the big picture for Latino entrepreneurs. We are really pleased to have our largest survey to date. This allows us to do more precise analysis and to tell a more complete story. Again, as we introduced last year, we compare Latino-owned businesses with white-owned counterparts. And we're very grateful to both Bain and to LBAN for their partnership in being able to allow us to have such a big sample. Now, sadly, the pandemic lingers. This is our second survey where we can look at its effects on our sample. And as with last year, the epidemic is a big challenge for our sample, but the trend is definitely going in the right direction. One thing many of us who worked on the report particularly enjoy is using the stories of individual entrepreneurs to bring some of our conclusions to life. The evidence in any of these stories is anecdotal, of course, but you can often see the parallels between what our analysis shows and what the entrepreneurs say. This slide highlights two things about Latino-owned businesses. First, as with many of the analyses in our report, it's striking that the similarities between white-owned and Latino-owned businesses are greater than the differences. The overwhelming majority of businesses of both kinds are consumer businesses, and business-to-business is another large chunk. But overall, they look very similar. To the extent that there are differences, Latino-owned businesses tend to be more direct-to-consumer, while there's a larger business-to-business core among white-owned businesses. I now want to turn to how businesses are rebounding from all the challenges of the pandemic. 2020 was a really terrible year, as you can all remember quite well. And while certainly not a great year, 2021 looks better for the businesses in our sample. So to be a little more specific about what's going on this graph, over 3/4 of businesses reported moderate to large negative impact of the pandemic in 2020, but that dropped to about 60% in 2021. The hardest hit group, those reporting a large negative impact, fell by more than half from 2020 to 2021. On balance, the pandemic is still clearly a challenge, but the outlook has improved markedly. And again, I just want to note that Latino-owned businesses don't look any different from their white-owned counterparts. The reports of the impact of the pandemic are almost identical across the two groups. The story of Leanna Flores brings some of the ideas I just mentioned to life. Now, you're going to hear from Leanna herself a little bit later on our panel, and I'll be thrilled to hear her perspective on this. But just to give you an idea of how what she's doing lines up a little bit with what we've talked about from a research perspective. First, she's a business-to-consumer entrepreneur, as she owns a restaurant chain that's focused on airports in the Southwest. She took over the business from her parents back in 2008, and she grew it steadily. But as you can imagine, the pandemic presented an existential threat to the business. As bad as the pandemic was for all restaurants, you can imagine how the challenges were even that much greater for restaurants and airports. The first and hardest challenge was downsizing dramatically and immediately. She furloughed 80% of her staff in early 2020. Leanna got PPP funding in the first round and worked closely with her community bank. As I said, 2021 was still a rough year. She's still about a third smaller than before the pandemic, but she's growing again and has rehired most of the people she had to let go. Leanna and her team are optimistic about 2022, hoping for a record year, and we'll hear more about that from her in a little bit. But before we get to that, we have a lot to tell you about a much broader set of entrepreneurs, 15,000 to be exact. So I now want to turn you over to Marlena Roscoe, who will dive much deeper into the findings of this year's report.
Good afternoon from us here in California, and thank you, Professor Paul Oyer, for providing that overview. It's a real pleasure to be here today and share with you the key findings from our 2021 SLAY survey of U.S. business owners. This marks our 7th report, which means we've been at this for a while now, bringing you all the latest trends on Latino entrepreneurship in the United States. This also marks our 2nd year unveiling our annual report virtually, as we are still experiencing the ever-present effects of the pandemic. Nonetheless, 2021 brought with it some semblance of a bounce back compared to 2020, as you just heard. The venture industry set a number of records, and corporations began to put some real resources behind racial justice and equity efforts. This is just the beginning, as there's still much more work ahead. And importantly, our data really speak to the opportunities and largely untapped potential of the Latino business segment. To put things into perspective, the latest population census shows that Latinos now represent nearly 1 out of every 5 people in the US. Along with population growth, consumption patterns total $1.85 trillion. But of course, Latinos are not just consumers, we are producers too, which is why we're here today. Latinos continue to start businesses at a faster rate than all others, 44% in the last 10 years compared to just 4% for non-Latinos. This production value alongside consumption trends would make Latinos in the US the 7th largest country in the world in terms of output. So with that context in mind, I'll now share key findings based on the analysis of our largest survey to date of 15,000 business owners. In terms of methodology, our survey and report focuses on employer firms, unless we share otherwise. And an employer firm is a business with at least 1 paid employee other than the owner. We focus on employer firms to align with the approach taken by the U.S. Census Bureau in the annual business survey, which we rely on for statistical purposes to make our sample as nationally representative as possible. So first, we have historically reported on the growth in the number of Latino-owned businesses. This year, we also highlight these businesses as job creators, as our first key finding shows. We find that Latinos are increasing their number of employees at a dramatically faster rate than their white counterparts. Related to this theme of employees, this year we also look at the kinds of jobs that are being created. We created an opportunities and benefits index and find that Latino-owned businesses are more likely to provide their employees with benefits and opportunities, including promotions, employer-paid benefits, above minimum wage jobs, and the development of skills and training. Now we're starting with these positive trends, but we also report on the ongoing impact of the pandemic. Things were still tough in 2021, although there were some bounce backs compared to 2020. Importantly, we find that in response to the pandemic, Latino business owners are more likely to make proactive, strategic business changes to mitigate the negative challenges. And next, it's important to note the kinds of businesses Latinos are starting. Last year, we reported on the fact that Latinos are starting businesses at a faster rate across virtually all industries. This year, we dig a little deeper and find that Latino-owned businesses are just as likely to develop and sell technology or software products. This propensity towards tech is a finding that we validate using census data. And lastly, we want to shed light on the perennial challenge in accessing capital. We find that Latino-owned businesses are more likely to be asked to provide collateral compared to their white counterparts, even after holding constant their business performance. I'll detail all of these key findings one by one, and we'll start with a detailed look at employee trends. So we've long reported the fact that Latinos are starting and continue to start businesses at a faster rate than all other groups. In fact, 50% of net new small businesses are created by Latinos. What this figure now shows is the growth trajectory and the number of employees across Latino-owned and white-owned businesses since 2007. The number of jobs created by Latino-owned businesses has grown from 1.9 million to 2.9 million in 2019, representing a 54% growth rate. This is compared to 10% job growth among white-owned businesses over that same time period. And to add more clarity to this employment picture, we explore the quality of jobs being produced. The Good Jobs Institute put together a framework for good jobs as meeting people's basic needs. This includes pay, benefits, schedules, and career paths. So we created two indices to measure how businesses treat their employees, an employee benefits index and an employee opportunities index. The latter considers whether employees have opportunities for promotions, training, and pay above minimum wage, among other career advancement measures. And although it may come as no surprise, it is important to note that Latino-owned businesses are more likely to have Latinos represented on their leadership teams, with 98% reporting Latino execs other than the owner. And in relation to other opportunities, we ran the index across a number of business and owner characteristics. And we find that Latino-owned businesses provide similar or even greater opportunities to their employees. And in this figure, we see that across a number of employer-based benefits, including health insurance, flexible work, paid holidays, retirement, and so on, Latinos report providing greater employer-based benefits. You'll hear from Daniel Montes, CEO and founder of Brilliant General Maintenance, and other entrepreneurs in a panel discussion to follow, but he strongly credits his team for making it the company it is today. His employees have heartfelt testimonials about Daniel helping them grow in their work and as individuals by helping them get an education. He's really built a team culture of familia and indicates that even those that have moved on will always have a home there. And then the next figure, I want to note that what we see for Latino-owned employer businesses really centering employees and their well-being, this happens across virtually all business revenue categories. So it's not just that the scaled or million-dollar Latino-owned business that is prioritizing employees. We see this across smaller revenue companies too. So I want to transition now to the ongoing impact of the pandemic. An important storyline, of course, is the revenue decline that many small businesses experience. But what we hardly hear about is the resourcefulness of entrepreneurs to ensure that their business survives. An important lifeline was the Paycheck Protection Program, with the SBA administering over $800 billion in federal relief aid to small businesses. And I do hope that you all will stay tuned for more from the 27th administrator of the SBA coming up in our programming. And in fact, when we consider the full time frame of this PPP, 30% of Latino-owned employer businesses received funding. This next finding is about other proactive and strategic business responses taken to mitigate the negative impact of the pandemic. This list shows that Latinos made more strategic business pivots throughout the course of the pandemic. 21% report improvements in technology. You'll soon hear from Leanna Flores, president of Fresquez Concessions, that used several of these strategies to emerge from the pandemic stronger. And as one example, the company automated its accounts payable process with the system that now uses artificial intelligence to read invoices and code them. And while she says that the pandemic really forced their hand to lean on technology, these adaptations will more likely show downstream upside. Now, other business pivots include 18% of Latino-owned businesses moving into e-commerce and 16% offering a new product or service, outpacing the share of white-owned businesses taking up these strategies. And in many ways, the pandemic accelerated the technology transition. But as this next key finding shows, Latinos are just as likely to develop and sell a technology or software product. In our survey, we use the standard industry classifications, or the NAICS, as this is used by federal statistical agencies to report on the US business economy. These industries include industries like food and accommodations, professional services, construction, and so forth. It's important to note that technology intersects virtually all traditional industries, and businesses are producing new technologies or are being enabled by tech in innovative ways. And in this year's survey, we define tech businesses as those that develop and sell a technology or software product. We find that 19% of Latino-owned businesses report developing and selling a technology or software product, and this is compared to 14% among white-owned businesses. Now, as this infographic shows, white-owned employer businesses outnumber Latino-owned employer businesses by a factor of 14. Nonetheless, we show there is an equal, if not greater, propensity among Latino entrepreneurs that cross the employer threshold to be tech businesses. And we validate this finding by looking at more specialized technology production as captured in the US Census Annual Business Survey. And here, across the share of Latino-owned businesses, there's a comparable representation in artificial intelligence, robotics, and specialized software. So taken together, these findings counter the widely held belief that the Latinx entrepreneurial pipeline in tech doesn't exist, or that minority entrepreneurs have less of an inclination towards starting tech businesses. Up next, you'll hear from Paola Santana. She's the CEO and founder of Social Glass, who sells a software platform to government. She says that as Latinos, we don't often see ourselves as tech entrepreneurs, but as people solving problems and developing a piece of technology so that we can get our work done. Santana also describes Latinos as being super resourceful, something we have certainly seen throughout the course of the pandemic. Now, we've also reported in the past that such resourcefulness and bootstrapping can only take a company so far. Businesses often need external capital to scale and grow. So I want to move on to our final key finding around capital. Last year, we reported on a very big gap in national bank loan access, whereby Latinos with comparable business performance measures and credit scores similar to their white counterparts have 60% lower odds of getting their financing approved. This year, we build on this access to capital story and uncover another one of the 5 C's of credit: collateral. We find that Latinos are required to offer up more collateral than their white counterparts. This figure shows that 1 out of 4 white business owners don't need to put up collateral compared to 1 out of 5 among Latino business owners. This means that the odds of not needing collateral are higher or better for white business owners. And certainly the pandemic has impacted the need for financing to mitigate challenges, but I want to end with the reported reasons why financing was sought. Both Latino-owned and white-owned businesses report needing to meet their operational expenses as the #1 reason for financing. But even in a pandemic year, Latino-owned businesses are more likely to report applying for financing to expand their business or to acquire additional capital assets. And as always, our report is fact-forward and ultimately demonstrates the formidable opportunity and potential of Latino entrepreneurs. For policymakers looking to encourage economic expansion and the growth of quality jobs, the growing Latino business sector is worthy of attention. Not only do US Latinos have $2.7 trillion in annual economic output, but there would be an additional $1.4 trillion of unlocked potential if Latino-owned businesses achieved revenue parity with white-owned businesses. This year's survey found that Latino-owned firms continue to be less successful in securing business loans, despite displaying similar characteristics across 2 approval criteria: credit and collateral. We also sparked the question of whether the VC industry is missing opportunities to invest in the Latino tech sector. Crunchbase has reported that only 2.6% of VC dollars in 2020 went to Latino and Black founders. And with the VC industry breaking records, we hope that this infusion of dollars is also growing and flowing to these groups. And importantly, we're heartened by the pandemic business pivots of Latinos and their optimism about rebounding. I encourage you all to read our 2021 State of Latino Entrepreneurship report to learn more about these findings and many others that we were unable to cover today. I'll now pass our virtual stage to Jennifer Garcia, COO of the Latino Business Action Network, who's going to introduce our all-star panel as they elaborate on these findings from their own experiences.
Great. Well, thank you, Marlene. That was very well done. I'm sure that the audience can agree that you delivered an insightful presentation. As Marlene mentioned, my name is Jennifer Garcia. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Latino Business Action Network. Can I just say how great it is to see hundreds of people joining us live today from across the country and even internationally. I'm glad you're here, and I hope that you found the research presentation informative, but even more importantly, that you find utility in the data, that you allow the data to influence the work that you do. And one small action step that you can take today and even right now is to go social. Share the data, share some of those headlines on your social media, or forward the report to a colleague. My goal in this segment of the agenda is to bring the data to life through a series of real stories from entrepreneurs. Elban leads the Latino Business Scaling Program at Stanford GSB, also known as SLAY Ed. The program is designed for Latino-owned businesses with over $1 million in revenue or $500,000 in external funding who are ready to scale their company. The three panelists that you will hear from today are graduates of this program, and they're part of our alumni network of nearly 900 entrepreneurs. You could see them in the chat shouting out their cohort now. As I welcome the panelists to the stage, I invite you to drop a line in the chat if you want to learn more about our program. So let's meet the entrepreneurs. We have Leanna Flores from Fresca's Concession. It is a people-oriented, family-owned food service organization that was started in 1976 in northern New Mexico. 46 years later, the organization has grown to 21 restaurants with 16 brands in 3 states, New Mexico, Texas, and Colorado. Daniel Montes, CEO and founder of Brilliant General Maintenance, which was also founded here in Silicon Valley in 1983 as a facilities maintenance organization focused on providing a worry-free experience to clients and a career path for their employees. It's a family-owned business operated with 4 offices here in California, as well as Nevada, New Mexico, Texas, Michigan, and Tennessee. Paola Santana is the CEO and founder of Social Glass, a Silicon Valley-based government technology startup leveraging artificial intelligence to transform government purchases worldwide. This software has helped governments across the US acquire over 4.5 million items directly from small businesses. You are all in for a treat. I'm very excited to share the stage with all of these panelists, so thank you very much for being here. Let's dive right in. We certainly can't talk about businesses without talking about COVID. And Marlene shared how COVID has impacted businesses in a variety of ways, some of those positive, other those negative. Leanna, let's start with you first. You are in the food industry, and we all know that the food industry has been extremely impacted. Tell us a little bit about your experience and what, if any, is the bright spot from the last 22 months?
Well, thank you, Jennifer, and just so excited to be here today. The last 2 years has certainly been the roller coaster that I know we've all experienced. And, coming off of 2019, that was the strongest year our organization had ever had. So, just as March of 2020 hit, there was just so much uncertainty that really affected us. We had 500 employees at that time, and it felt like our entire organization was being decimated, and everything that, my family has worked for was just slipping through our fingers. So, a lot of hard decisions we had to make, as particularly here in New Mexico, where, we had multiple shutdowns to full service restaurants, and those are some of our strongest revenue generating restaurants within our company. So, just the hardship and the heartache that came along with, closing for the first time and then having to, go through reductions in force as we see that we're probably going to be shut down for a really long time. Really challenged our family, a lot of sleepless nights, and so, just, I mean, I could get real emotional about like just how challenging that time was for us, and really the silver lining for us was understanding that we're a people-focused business, and we had boots on the ground. We had to expand and contract so many times through multiple shutdowns that our team is the team members that stuck with us and that we were able to keep on. We just developed this new level of resiliency and trust as a team. So it really like strengthened the culture of our team members and our company to where we have this new level of trust with each other. And I think we all lead with from a little bit more of a vulnerable place. So leading with a little more vulnerability, I should say. And so I guess that's one of the silver linings, in addition to what was mentioned earlier, as far as us really, really leaning on technology through those times. I mean, at one point I was doing some accounts payable and running the checkbook. And so as I'm going through this, I'm like, why are we doing this way? There is a technology for this. So I definitely say that us leaning on technology has really propelled us and has allowed us to focus on initiatives that we wanted to get to. So that's really where insert cohort 8, what I learned from SLAY in 2019 has really benefited us to where we're at right now and continue to grow.
That's awesome. What a great lesson for entrepreneurs, that the opportunity to leverage technology, and you don't necessarily have to be in a pandemic to do so. That is your bright spot coming out of it. Daniel, I want to go to you here. You too have a story of making some strategic pivots during the pandemic, and your business is considered and was considered an essential business. Tell us a little bit about your experience.
Well, there was obviously it was a game changer. I mean, we had to change everything from people used to clock in the same location. Now we can no longer congregate. We had to rely on technology to allow those employees to clock in and out, to send the COVID surveys, to do all the inspections. All the activities had to be redone without having to congregate. So on a way, we were already ahead of the curve with some of these areas that were being handled through technology, whether it was payroll delivery and so on through direct deposits. But this really pushed it to a whole other level. It changed everything because we needed to protect our people, and it was a must. So we had to come up with creative solutions in every aspect of our business, since we didn't stop. A lot of our business was considered essential. So we had to be out there in the middle of everything, doing everything different while protecting our people.
Yeah, absolutely. Paula, let me just bring you into this conversation. Is there anything that you would add to your experience during the pandemic? I don't think we could hear you. Absolutely. So let's while Paula gets her mic set there, let's transition to capital. Marlene pointed out and has been covering capital and the access to capital for several years now. Leanna, I want to start with you. You have a very interesting story around capital because your business banker played a very active role. Tell us about that experience with capital, and maybe in that story, I would love to hear the advice that you would offer to other entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. Yes, our business banker, we had worked with him for over 10 years. And so, we followed him from one bank to another. And, what was really important, I guess I'm going to lead with advice to entrepreneurs. And what was really important that my dad really made sure that we knew and is really important to him is understanding the idea of the relationship and what is needed and what levels each person in a bank can really what they can approve. So building those relationships to understand when that's needed, can I rely on this person, and can they call? Can they write me that letter of credit when it needs? Just keeping that in the back pocket, I think really benefited us during this time. So having those relationships built and already established, our story is different because it was very collaborative, and we're really thankful to be so established in the community here in New Mexico. So they did call, and they were very proactive with us to ensure that, once our application was through and we could sign on the dotted line, we were first in line. My parents were, he called, the president of the bank called my parents and said, okay, be here at 9 a.m. And so we're just so grateful for that opportunity and that level of care that was extended to us.
That's a phenomenal story, and one that I would love to hear more often, right? Having the relationship with your bankers so that they are advocating for you, championing you, and inviting you to sign when appropriate. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Paula, let me just check if you're back online and connected. Not yet. Okay. Okay, let's Daniel, let me go to you, and I would love to hear a little bit about your experience accessing capital.
Well, we're very, very fortunate to not having to access capital on our own, other than the PPP that came on board this last year. So I wouldn't be able to give you a lot of information into what it takes, other than the stories that I have heard from our peers. That is normally very difficult. But I think what Leanne touched on is something that is super important, is having that network, is talking to the right people prior to needing capital. You don't want to be developing a relationship when you're in desperate need of finances resources. You want to develop those ahead of time. You want to establish a credit line when you don't need it, so the day that you have the need for that capital is already in place. That's what I would say to you as my advice to young entrepreneurs. Get the funding when you don't need it, so when you need it, it's available to you.
That's absolutely right. At Alban, we talk to entrepreneurs and small business owners all the time. And one of the things that we say is exactly what you said. The best time to build a relationship with your banker is now, before you need capital. And certainly, Leanna kind of led into this, but we didn't get a lot of the details. But that relationship didn't happen during the pandemic. That relationship with her father and the business leaders happened over the years, and perhaps even decades, that she could speak to as well. Great. I want to talk a little bit, Daniel. You mentioned that you haven't had a lot of experience with capital. And when we were in our intimate group here, one of our members said, Daniel doesn't have a story about capital because he has been bootstrapping his business for so many years. And that's one of the things that Marlene highlighted in the report, is that when there is a barrier to accessing capital, what Latinos are doing is becoming very resourceful. I would love to just hear from your perspective, Daniel, what are those areas where you felt you've had to be very resourceful?
I think it's cultural too. We're very conservative as a culture, and we believe in cash business. So I understood I had to scale, but I was also very concerned with, overstretching, overinvesting. So my conservative nature allowed me to be very creative in how to reinvest, how to make deals that, if they had a risk, it was a calculated risk. It was in a very conservative nature, but we have managed to grow our business without having the need of raising capital to the level that we have gotten it. We always knew that at some point we would have to. We just haven't gotten to that level. We've been very successful. And I attribute it to our entire team because of the way they function. They're all investors in the company. They're all invested their life and their career. They understand our business. They are not just into one department. They understand our entire business from the moment they come into our organization, how they contribute, whether it's a department that is creating revenue, or is a department that is supporting the revenue creating departments. So it's a culture within our culture, but I attribute it to our conservative nature, but it's a formula that has worked because we have never had to rely on getting outside funding.
And I do want to come back to you in just a little bit, because you're alluding to the culture of your team and how you operate. So I'm going to come back to you in just a little bit on that. But let's, Paula, I think we're back live with her. I want to come to you and transition into the concept of capital as it pertains to tech companies. And Marlene, in her presentation, really combated a common perception that Latinos are not in tech and that are not starting tech firms. But certainly the data is showing that Latinos are just as likely to own tech companies. And Paula, you're the perfect example of this. Your first company was a drone delivery company, and now you're leading your second company, tech company, which is leveraging AI to transform governments. So you certainly are no stranger to the world of tech and specifically to raising capital. But I know that this time around, you were raising capital in the midst of a pandemic. Tell us about that.
That's correct, Jennifer. Can you hear me now? I hope you can. Awesome. So this is such a big personal topic for me because I see so many Latinos developing tech, designing great user experiences, running companies where 80% of some of their processes are automated in some way or another. And then they tell me they're not tech entrepreneurs. I'm like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? You're a digital creator. You're creating new experiences, new products, new solutions for the world. It's just that past generations wouldn't consider themselves tech entrepreneur when they are building some pieces of technology, or even worse, we think we need to do big efforts to bring this diversity to the table when this diversity is already creating the tables where we're sitting. We just need to give them stages or the spotlight or feature there or highlight their work more because we've been always there. So that's number one. I think we need to do more effort to bring more diversity, especially Latinos, Latinas to the tech conversation. But I would rather that we bring them to the leadership table because we are already there doing the work. That's first part. Second part is, recognizing that many of the solutions that we are creating are enabled by tech and that some of that tech has been created in-house. So we discussed with Leanna that some of the technology pieces she's been using internally in her businesses are part of technology that she acquired from someone else and then some customizations that she did. But she doesn't know that many other businesses like her could be using that and leveraging that technology that she built internally. She doesn't consider her company a tech company, but I'm sure she's taking some of those processes to the next level by adding that level of customization. That's number two. And then capital. I mean, the fact that we're super resourceful, the most powerful and resilient people I know are Latin women, I have to say it. And then because, we just do what we can with what we have. And the problem is that we leave so much money on the table. Mm-hmm. So I tell my fellow tech entrepreneurs, money is not going to come and knock on your door, but that money is being deployed right now, especially in Silicon Valley. And if you're not out there telling people, I'm a woman, I'm developing tech, I'm developing deep tech in industries that haven't been cracked before, the investor will never know that you're around. So it's our duty to go out and reclaim that money that is being powered right now into billions of dollars into amazing tech solutions. And many of them are being developed and led by Latinos.
Paula, you've said so many things there that I really want to underscore and highlight so that our audience doesn't miss this. I love how you said we have always been there, but now we are being highlighted. It's really important to know that there's so many great companies that are not only tech-enabled, leveraging tech, but also the creators of tech. And so let me ask you, there was a Crunchbase article this week that said, despite the dollar increase in VC funds, the overall percentage of VC funds going to Latino-owned businesses is still extremely low, less than 2%. What would you say to the VC community to ensure that they're not missing investment opportunities in Latino tech founders such as yourself and many others?
This is a great question. So I'm going to put it, let's talk with data. We were raising money. We're Silicon Valley based. This is my second tech company. So I'm a seasoned tech entrepreneur. I'm deep into gov tech because I'm a government expert. I came to the United States with a Fulbright scholarship to figure out the future of governments. And I think Latinos, we tend to work on problems that are real life problems. So when I am in Silicon Valley pitching this GovTech company to improve governments worldwide, many Silicon Valley investors would tell me, that's an industry we kind of don't like. And I'm like, yeah, but that's the industry that needs massive change. As I'm trying to do that pitch, I raised over $500,000, which, by the way, in many tech media, if you don't raise at least $1 million, you're not going to get featured. So I raised $500,000, a little bit more. And in the middle of raising that money, the pandemic hit, and suddenly I cannot continue raising money because my customers that are governments are knocking on every channel that I have telling me, don't sell me your software. I actually need your help right now. So what ended up happening is that just having launched our tech product 4 months prior, we ended up having $4 million in direct government sales, which I stopped fundraising because I was making money directly from my client that investors were telling me was an almost impossible to crack client. What am I telling you with this? I understood my market. I'm still, open to understand my market better than anyone else. And then if an investor is closed on their traditional way to assess risk and assess opportunities, they're gonna miss opportunities like mine. So I know so many people cracking real challenges, not the next app with the next color filtering thing. I'm talking about problems that 99% of the world has, and that we're cracking it today. It's not a future solution in 10 years. It's something that I'm doing today, and the validation is there. How can investors find me? They need to look for me. I'm going to be out there also looking for them, and I'm encouraging all Latinos to be out there raising millions of dollars. I also talk to Latinos, and they're like, well, I'm raising $100,000. I'm raising $500,000. That's nothing. You need to go big. Mm-hmm. You need to have a deck that is, you're raising $5 to $10 million. If you only raise 2.5 million, that's okay for a starter, because many people that I know that are in Silicon Valley, they have a slide deck that is not fully completed and they can raise $2.5 million. Why can't we?
Love it. Love it. That's really great. Leanna, Daniel, do you want to add anything to anything that Paula just said? Okay. One thing that I also want to mention here is that you said we need to be out there, and VC community needs to look for you, right? How do they find you? How do they find other Latino startup companies? There is a proactive, you need to be proactive in this. So thank you for just calling that out. I appreciate it. I want to transition now to another key finding in the report around benefits. And I find it a remarkable storyline that Latinos are starting businesses at a faster rate. Their job growth rate grew 53.9% from 2007 to 2019, in comparison to 9.8% for white-owned businesses. In addition to all that, Latino-owned businesses are providing benefits and advancement opportunities to their employees at a higher rate. Certainly, we're all familiar with the headlines about the Great Resignation and the labor shortage. So, Daniel, I want to go to you on this question and ask you, what has been your experience with the Great Resignation, and how has benefits played a role into your ability to retain employees or not?
Well, the Great Resignation is real. I mean, the shortage of labor pool is real. I don't think it's just here in California, Silicon Valley. I think it's throughout many parts of the nation. But what I would say, when we think benefits, a lot of times we think of just fringe benefits, but the reality is investing in your people, providing that career path, making them feel at home, having them understand how they contribute, having them understand how they can benefit from your growth. That's a bigger investment that a lot of us tend to overlook. How to invest in your people, how to create that environment that will allow them to be successful as they're growing within your company. And what price do you put on that loyalty, on that history, on that knowledge about your processes, your product, your delivery, your customer service, and everything else? So I invite you guys to think a little different and invest on your employees as part of the benefit that your company will get a great return on an investment. I know that is, if you talk to the employees, you always want to grow. You always want to do a very good job, and you want to be scaling yourself as a career. So from me to you is the biggest investment that we have made, and it has paid off. It has created a great return on our investment.
You alluded to something earlier, Daniel, where you mentioned the culture of your company that you're establishing with your employees is that they know how to move the needle. Tell us a little bit about what that means specifically in your company.
What it means is that in our company, and this is the way we put it, you may work in one department as your major, but it is your job to have a minor about the other departments and understand and play in a cohesive role on how to move that needle in the direction corporate has designed the company to go. How do we better take care of our customers? How do we better take care of our employees? We all have to have an understanding so that we can contribute to the overall corporate strategy. That, sounds easy. It's a little bit difficult once you get into the mix, but if you stick to your brand, if you understand your brand, people tend to, once they get it, they understand it and they go and they give you their maximum, and you're going to see their smiles on their faces when they achieve certain goals, personal or company-wide, within their department or other groups within the company. So it's been a great formula for us, and we'll continue to support it as long as it works. So
that's great. I find this really interesting because, Paula, you're in tech, and we all know that tech is extremely competitive when it comes to talent. Tell us a little bit about how you leverage the benefits in the tech world.
Well, a couple of things, and this is a tricky question because contrary to Daniel and Leanna that have like multi-billion dollars almost companies, I would say, and they've been around in business for a while. My first tech company, as you mentioned, is over now 10 years old and is a drone delivery company. But the second company is a GovTech company that I founded only 4 years ago. So we have a highly specialized workforce that is younger. They are not focused necessarily only on monetary compensation, but they do need a sense of purpose and belonging and being part of a bigger, larger vision for themselves and the world, which is amazing because we're totally aligned on something that we want to do that is transforms governments worldwide. And this hasn't been done at the speed that the world needs. So they come right in and they get ready to lead many of the new, I would say, activities that need to be led in a team that is trying to create a new path for things that have never been done in the past. So number one, we have a remote team that has a lot of flexibility to manage their time, to manage, they don't clock in, but at the end of the day, we have all these remote tools where they do need to stick to a goal every week. So that's number one. Number two, they have incentives to join the company by also having ownership on the company in the terms of stock options. Number three, we know that many of them are not in the United States. So we need to provide them the equivalent of the basics, like, healthcare. How can we provide our people with a good cushion so if something happens, they can access good healthcare worldwide? So we cannot have a benefit plan in the United States, but we give them the equivalent of what they would pay for healthcare access in their country and in their currency. And lastly, we encourage them, and actually I wouldn't necessarily say it's a benefit, but we push them to do a tech training or some sort of online program that would advance their career. And they have the option to change divisions within the company, or to even say what title they would want to have in the company. So some of them would come like, oh, I like this title, I want to have this title. And then they would also say, but I'm not there. So you can work together with them to, create that path of, this is how you get there. This is how you get to this title. And, I've received pushback from these people. A Latina leader showed me this. She told me, you cannot hire people for where they are. You need to hire them so they can come and get what they need in your company, in practice. So that's the opportunity I'm giving the people that work with me. And I never set out to hire Latinos necessarily. I wanted just to hire the best. And then we have a company that is 90% Latinos, building tech in Silicon Valley. So, it's just what they see. They see we can do it.
That's fantastic. Leanna, let's hear from your experience in terms of benefits. And I know that kind of played out a little bit differently. So I'd love to hear how you manage that.
Yeah, I'm just really enjoying hearing Danielle and Paula as far as what you're saying. And, there are two principles that I could really, one principle is within our organization is, you are the CEO of your career, of your development. And so really, hey, this is the path to get to where you want to get to. What is it? And so the second thing we speak to in our values is limitless. And that really comes from, my dad and my mom. My dad dropped out of school in 9th grade, and, my mom graduated with her certificate in cosmetology. And so, they created from a landscaping company what we have today. And so those are the two things. No one was gonna, take my mom or my dad by the hand and help them to get to where they did. They had to do that by themselves, or together, I should say. And then I came along. And so what what that means is, so much of what people are looking for right now, to really speak to the Great Resignation, is they're looking for that purpose that Danielle was speaking to, that vision. And so, I'm going to speak again to cohort 8 and what I learned from Professor Huggy around, winning the ground war, and having them see the vision is just so important, and how they can relate to it. And I think that's been the biggest cultural shift that's really helped us even, add new benefits, so to speak, outside of, the cultural language that's been there, but really defining it in a way that people can take these lessons with them wherever they go in their lives. And so, to the tangible benefits that we've transitioned and offered, most importantly, given this time that we're in, was adding in an employee assistance program, which isn't very common in our industry. And so we're super proud of being able to offer that to every single employee, regardless if they, participate in benefits with us or not. And of course, alongside that, we have, we try to stay really competitive in the market from from a wage standpoint. And I think just helping that increase in transparency by providing surveys, leaning on our HRIS a lot more. We have a learning management system that adds so much more, or provides so much more learning. And it, again, pointing to, you're the CEO of your own career. Take those courses. It's going to help you with your communication so you can get to a leadership position or wherever you're looking. And that increase in transparency has helped me know where our team members are at. So adding in a layer of, communication ambassador. So they can have exposure to me and our leadership team directly, so they understand where we're headed as a company, and we know where they're headed. So now we can really attach what they're looking for out of their time with us, what their goals are, and help them see that they're limitless.
As I hear the three of you speak, I really can't help but think about anytime an organization decides to offer benefits to their employees, it is a cost, right? Quite frankly, it is a cost. But all of you have identified that there is an ROI in that cost. There is an investment that you are committed to, because you know that when your employees feel valued, you're then able to drive your company. They're then able to drive your company to a new level. And so I really just want to point out and congratulate all of you for committing to that and making that investment into your employees. The other thing that I thought about is, we have a restaurant industry, we have maintenance, and we have a tech company represented, all of whom I would assume have different profiles of employees, from technical skills that are required to education levels. And regardless of that as well, you two have been very thoughtful and committed to offering benefits across the board. So it's just interesting to hear these conversations come to light. We are getting ready to kind of get the final thoughts from our panelists here. But as I do, as we come to a close, I want to point out that in today's audience, we have a variety and a very diverse segment with us. We have entrepreneurs, capital providers, government officials, corporate leaders, and many, many more. And so I would love to take this opportunity to allow our panelists to give a closing thought or a closing call to action in terms of how can our audience today further the success of Latino and Latina entrepreneurs. And so I'm going to do this in a somewhat segmented way. I'm going to start with Daniel, and I'm going to ask you, what can corporate leaders do to further the success of Latino and Latina entrepreneurs?
Jennifer, I think that one of the areas that they can really do that will benefit all those entrepreneurs that are coming up, we lack an ecosystem where people can get the education on how to network, how to raise capital, how to scale in the industries that we're in. How we need that ecosystem where people can understand what drives us, as well as the industries that we work in creating the investment for those who need capital. We have got to have that ecosystem, just like Page Mill and Sand Hill Road. We probably need to create our own El Camino Real where people can go and be understood for the venture that they're trying to drive, because there's a lot of smart, passionate people that want to drive their business, but we need to create that ecosystem that would allow them to know the step-by-step on how to get there.
Fantastic. I think about an ecosystem, and Elban is certainly building an ecosystem. As you've seen in the chat, 900 entrepreneurs from across the country, mentors, and capital providers. And I'll say that building an ecosystem is extremely powerful, right? We hear testimonies every day from entrepreneurs who have found value within this ecosystem. But the other thing to point out is building an ecosystem requires work, and it really does require the linking of arms of so many organizations and corporations across the country. So I really do think you're on it, Daniel, when you say we need the corporate leaders to come together to help build the ecosystem. Paula, same question to you, but I want your answer to target to governments. What is one thing that government leaders can do to further the success of Latino and Latina entrepreneurs?
I love this question because it talks straight into what we do as Social Glass. So governments are the biggest decision makers in the world, and they're also the largest purchasers in the world, in our countries, and in every community, state, local that we have. So what I'm asking governments is, subsidies are great, grants are great, but what small businesses need, especially Latino small businesses, is your business. So government agencies, procurement teams, economic development departments, try to buy small and buy local. And if you're lacking tools to figure out what is being sold locally around your demographic, get tools like Glass Tools so you can find them very easily. And what I'm telling those 400 million small businesses out there is become digital, especially Latino businesses. Come digital, make the investment, because you're gonna start getting more traction, new inquiries and new sales channels just by becoming digital. Get newer generations that can help you streamline how you do how you have a presence on social media, how you have a presence on all those other networks, and start getting your products and services online so people like government agencies and other businesses can find you. That's the money and that's the economy I wanna get Latinos in.
Absolutely love it. That is so powerful. And I'm just going to extend that to our corporate leaders that are in the offices and that are in the audience as well, right? We want our small businesses to do business with you. And so that same call to action that Paula just mentioned, I would extend that to corporate leaders. All right, Leanna, one thing that banks and lending institutions can do to further the success of Latino and Latina entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I guess the one thing for me is to go deeper. A lot of banks have initiatives to support, Latino women, Latinos in general, and an initiative doesn't equate to funding. And so understand our businesses, understand the opportunity, and understand the industry, I think is really helpful because and go past the box, right? I know so many times we're limited in that, yes, in receiving the funding because the box isn't checked or it's not the right box. So understanding, and taking risk.
Go deeper. And I'm just going to repeat that because I think what you said is so powerful. An initiative does not equate to funding. Fabulous. This was remarkable. Thank you all for sharing your closing thoughts. One of the things that the mantra that we live by and we promote to our entrepreneurs within Alban is we say, do business with each other and get business with each other, get business for each other. I extend that mantra out to all of you. This is how we support Latino-owned businesses and the advancement of Latino-owned businesses to really link up, to really open doors, to introduce others to your network. Because when we see the success of Latino-owned businesses, we see the success for our entire economy. So will you join me all in expressing appreciation for these three panelists? You all were amazing. Thank you very much. The exciting programming continues with the fireside chat between Dean Levin and Administrator Guzman. Administrator, we are grateful for your participation today. It is important for Latino-owned businesses to have a represented voice at the SBA. And I speak on behalf of all of those watching. Thank you for being here and for your ongoing support. Dean Levin, we appreciate the GSB's collaboration and your personal commitment to the work of Alban and to SLAY. So thank you for leading this fireside chat. And now I hand it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you. And thanks to all of the SLAY entrepreneurs who participated in the last panel, which was just wonderful and such a great illustration of the SLAY educational program and the entrepreneurs who go through it and the impact that they're making. The Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative was inspired, as Professor Jerry Porras said at the beginning of this event, by the growing Latino population and the growing number of Latino entrepreneurs and the recognition that Latino businesses were going to be, already were, and were going to increasingly be an important economic force in the US economy. And at this point, we have now run more than 800 entrepreneurs through the SLAY educational program, and we look forward to this forum every year as a chance to bring that community together and to talk about the latest SLAY research. And today, we are just very fortunate to be joined by Isabella Guzman, the administrator of the Small Business Administration. Isabella was nominated by President Biden and confirmed by the Senate and has been the SBA administrator for almost a year. Administrator Guzman, you come from a family that had a small business. You've been an entrepreneur yourself. You've had a distinguished career working in the policy arena in California at the federal level in the Obama administration. You now run the Small Business Administration. You've made considerations of equity and opportunity front and center at the SBA. It's actually hard to imagine anyone who would be better qualified to speak at this event. Welcome.
It's my pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to this. I've, of course, been tracking the work of SLAE for over the years, and so it's exciting to be with this group and have a conversation about Latino entrepreneurship.
So we have an almost endless number of topics that we could cover. We'll try to get to as many as we can in our time. I'd love to start is by asking you about your general perspective on Latino entrepreneurship and its role in the economy, and maybe to say a little bit about what is it that inspires you the most about the growing rates of Latino entrepreneurship that we've heard about in this event, and what do you view as some of the biggest challenges facing Latino entrepreneurs?
That's great. Yeah, well, I mean, of course, just putting in context, America's 32.5 million small businesses and innovative startups are giants in our economy, and it's really my honor to be their voice. I mean, they do create 2/3 of net new jobs, as we know, and employ nearly half the private workforce. And so they are a power in our economy and in our neighborhoods and in the global stage as well in terms of innovation and beyond. And President Biden really has committed to building a more productive economy with the greater capacity to deliver goods and services to the American people. And that is what small businesses do. When we want this growth economy where small businesses can compete. And when you think of Latino entrepreneurship, it's quite exciting because it is one of the fastest growing segments of the economy. And we know they're making incredible progress. And I know that SLAE's research, which I was able to review, and Dr. Orozco's presentation really outlined that impact and that power that we'll continue to see into the future. That growth is also happening everywhere across the U.S. in practically every state. And I think that's also what's exciting. It's a national trend, and it's nearly in every corner. It's not just certain states or certain cities that we would traditionally think of. So I really am inspired by that growth. Of course, I have an ingrained belief in entrepreneurship as a pathway to a better future, the American dream, wealth building for families and communities. And I've experienced it myself, of course, growing up in a small business family. President Biden said that we inherited 4 crises when we came in, and that's COVID, the economy, climate change, and racial justice. And I think all of these are interrelated and also touch our small businesses, and in particular our Latino small businesses. And this is, why equity and an olive government approach to equity in particular are so vital, and why I'm excited to be a part of the Biden-Harris administration in particular. And really Latino entrepreneurship just gives me hope at the opportunity to really work towards a future economy that is more inclusive and to narrowing those opportunity gaps that limit us as a country, as a nation, and our economy.
Let's pick up on the last part you talked about the Biden administration coming in, you coming into the SBA at a time with these 4 challenges, including the pandemic. And of course, we know that Latino businesses were hit especially hard by the pandemic. That was a big finding in the SLAE research last year, and others have also seen that. The SBA has been really right in the middle of it because of the role that you've played in administering the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. Would love to hear a little about how Latino businesses have accessed that program, what you've done to make sure that they've been full participants in that program, how that's working, kind of what your perspective has been on that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the bottom line too is PPP saved millions of businesses. It was really transformative, as has COVID EIDL been, and some of the other relief programs in the American Rescue Plan. And the whole COVID relief package across the pandemic timeframe has really transformed the SBA. I know I've mentioned this before, but the going from a $40 billion output agency to scale to the $1.2 trillion in relief during COVID that the SBA administered was just transformative to really the types of businesses we serve and who we are. And it's 11.4 million PPP loans approved, 4 million EIDL approved. That's not even just processed. And much of that growth, came through, of course, our PPP program, but we expanded our lender network from 1,000 to 5,000 through PPP. But we know, in particular, the early rounds had significant gaps. And when the Biden-Harris administration took over, that was, of course, a priority with PPP funds still being available. And we immediately got to work revamping PPP as well as our other relief programs, just to make sure that they could reach the smallest of the small. That was the priority, including our sole proprietors businesses, and over-indexing to women and people of color, as well as veterans and other underserved populations, and those who were really dramatically impacted by the pandemic. And we shifted policies on PPP to really emphasize small businesses under 20 employees. And the results show that 96% of PPP loans in 2021 went to businesses with less than 20 employees. And the average loan size was $40K, but dropped to even $14K towards the last couple of months. And really, there was a driven effort towards equity, the outreach, but also the design. And so there were specific changes within the PPP policies that allowed for more inclusion. And I think, that gives us great pride in the Biden-Harris administration to have been able to get this relief into more hands of businesses who were really impacted and needed it.
I thought that was one of the most striking findings in the SLAE research this year, was that early in the pandemic, Latino businesses were accessing PPP at much lower rates than other businesses, but by the end they ended up accessing it, in fact, at higher rates. And so it just shows the results of the efforts that you made and your agency made. You said something that I want to pick up on, because it's such a mind-boggling number that maybe not everyone quite appreciates it, which was that the SBA went from being doing $40 billion a year in loans and invest at a balance sheet that big, to $1 trillion in 1 year. And when we talk about scaling here at Stanford all the time, that's a big thing we talk about at the business school. That's scaling. That's a giant exponential. I mean, just a huge step change. Tell us a little about what that's like to run an agency that grows that fast, and what some of the issues are, and just how you manage something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's such a great opportunity, I think, because the SBA has been forever transformed by the portfolios that we've carried during COVID and continue to carry. And it's so different than what the SBA historically has done. We were tiny. Last year, we had a record year, so now it was up to $50 billion in our core loans and investment portfolio across SBA. But these are typically not the types of businesses we necessarily serve well, and through the PPP. So those sole proprietors, those smaller entities, maybe hadn't even heard of SBA before. And so it's such a unique opportunity to be able to leverage that attention that's been given to the SBA and to the benefits of being able to work with a lending network and access capital for your business growth. And so I just think that positions us to really try to do better for our businesses out there, and really meet them where they are, and especially now that we've had an opportunity to engage with them. Of course, unparalleled in the scale is the ability to have adopted technology, and really the president's commitment was to make sure that the relief got into the hands of businesses that was intended to serve, and that we really controlled for fraud. And so we know that you don't have to sacrifice certainty for speed. So being able to have best practices and technology to control for fraud, and integrate that technology to create simplicity and easier access to programs is something that we've taken away, and it's informed the design of our future programs as well. And some of the relief programs that came out of the American Rescue Plan, like the Restaurant Revitalization Fund program, or eventually the Shuttered Venues, which I stepped into and we transformed, and COVID Idle, which is also was in heavy need of some transformation, and we tried to unlock some of that capital. So I think that knowing that design, implementation, the outreach, all of that has to be customer first, technology forward, and equitable at the outset, in order to make sure that we can reach these expanded communities. And also, just the last thing is doing it with expanded networks and partners. I mean, it matters the networks that you surround yourself with as an entrepreneur. And so, of course, this network is incredible. And so kudos to all the businesses who have been able to tap into that resource. But we want to make sure that we continue to leverage these networks to better connect with our small businesses.
In general, access to credit has been a big theme that we've heard about running the SLAE program. It's been in the SLAE research, and and we heard about it in the last session quite a bit from from the entrepreneurs who spoke. Once we get past as we get past the pandemic, how do you think about the SBA's role in promoting better access to credit, and particularly for Latino businesses that might be owned by historically underrepresented groups?
We're trying to learn from the strengths of PPP distribution as an example, or the experience that we had in direct lending around COVID EIDL, to really try to solve for some of the big capital gaps that we see. And we know that less than half of small firms obtain funds from a bank. They've had to look for alternatives, oftentimes online expensive capital or credit cards, or relying on just a more limited personal wealth. And so I do think access to capital continues to be one of the overarching issues that we should be addressing. It's core to our mission. And we know that that's even worse for firms owned by people of color and women. And so these gaps aren't just in the marketplace broadly, it's also in the SBA's lending portfolio. I mean, our loans under 150,000 in particular, which of course that small dollar loan is really challenging to access. And we've seen a decline, nearly 50% over the past 5 years. And same with the number of lenders or the concentration of those loans with the smaller number of lenders. And so we want to reverse that. We want to expand the networks, the entry points that businesses can come into SBA lending or our partner network, and use technology for that, as well as the balance sheet of the federal government, which brings me to the Build Back Better Act and President Biden's commitment to continuing to try to push that forward. But we want to lower the cost of capital, just like Build Back Better lowers the cost for really core programs like healthcare and childcare and prescription drugs. It also lowers the cost of capital with investments at the SBA to try to expand our networks of lenders and support those community financial institutions who proved really core to helping us reach the smallest entities in a more diverse base during PPP, but also giving us some authority to be able to really change policies and change the way we do business to try to break some of those capital gaps in small dollar loans and working capital.
What do you think are the key steps that are needed there? We have lots of small business owners, entrepreneurs in the audience. What do you see as the barriers that you can help them with in terms of accessing loans or accessing capital?
Mm-hmm. On the lending side, I mean, there's less entry points. And so just in terms of the banks interested in this small dollar loan space, for example, or working capital, there's less incentives in that space. And we recognize that. So that's why a direct lending product where the government can leverage the balance sheet and of the federal government and be able to use that through a network of lenders to get affordable loans to small businesses. I think that a guarantee on an SBA loan is of course valuable, and the ability to sell it in the secondary market. We want to be able to power that skill set and of our lenders, and also power the SBA to be able to expand the capital, make it easier and simpler to apply, but also looking at the underwriting criteria and being more aggressive. As one of your earlier panelists said, be willing to take more risks. And we know we need to make investments to be able to advance this economy, and that includes investments in our small businesses.
Do you think, I mean, now that the many businesses had the experience of accessing PPP, could that be helpful, in fact, in terms of people have now been through the process of accessing the federal government program, and this will raise awareness or the ability to is that something you can leverage or build on?
I definitely think so. I mean, financial literacy and just having a core understanding of the paperwork required to try to access any capital. That's definitely been a lesson learned for people as they gathered information to apply for a PPP or other grant programs or a COVID EIDL. And so I do think that's been a learning that I hope will stay with us over the years. I think that's something that we have to continually look at on an ongoing basis, but that's definitely been helpful. And I hope that not only that, but so many businesses that I've also spoken to, of course, they used it for core of retaining their employees and using it for workforce. But in addition to that, being able to have capital to free up to rethink about their pivots or their expansion or what they could do in the marketplace, I think was liberating. I mean, we know that access capital can lead to growth. An earlier panelist of yours talked about the revenue side of the equation, as I like to call it, those market opportunities, which the SBA is really leaning into quite heavily as well, in government contracting, as well as e-commerce, and e-commerce as a pathway to global trade. But we really, we know that they need that capital to grow. And so being able to take that leap and have that relationship with the lender to be able to consider growth opportunities with capital, I think is hopefully a game changer.
Yeah, it's great hearing that you're thinking about how the SBA can play a bigger role in the future about expanding access to capital for small businesses and Latino businesses. That's really interesting. Let me ask you. I'd love to ask you about just some of the challenges that small business owners are facing right now. There's a huge amount of uncertainty in the economy. Inflation is up for the first time in many years. We were just hearing about the job market and the challenges of hiring. The supply chains are disrupted. How's that affecting, from your perspective, how's that affecting small businesses? And you have any tips or guidance for the folks in everyone who's in the audience?
Well, it's perfect timing for this since it's 1 year into the Biden-Harris administration. So I do want to share that overall in 2021, and in large part thanks to the President's American Rescue Plan, we did see the strongest ever monthly job growth and the largest ever decline in unemployment and the strongest economic growth in 4 decades. And just recently it was announced with the fastest recovery in terms of pandemic recovery of the G7. And so there's a positive story there as well. But during this time of great challenge and uncertainty as well, we've seen applications for new small businesses increase by 30%. And that does give me incredible hope, as we know small businesses, as I said, are those giants in the economy that are really going to propel some growth forward. I know that we do want to commit to building that productive economy and really addressing some of the challenges in supply chains, as well as addressing the cost issues too, through Build Back Better and lowering costs of childcare and healthcare and prescription drugs, which we know will benefit small businesses and their employees. But I think that in this environment where we know entrepreneurship is growing and we know that the economy has some great foundations from which to grow and continue to propel our small businesses, I think that what's key is that we continue to look at plans to move forward to help support small businesses. And so those investments in what we can do to help businesses access capital, but also the marketplaces. And I'm very heartened, of course, by President Biden's particular commitment, of course, to his day one executive order on equity, but also those commitments around equity and procurement and leveraging the federal spend. Of course, the federal government is the largest buyer in the world. And so being able to make significant procurement reforms in his first year in office to be able to open up more opportunities for small businesses and to force some tracking and transparency as well in the process. And I think those are all positives moving forward that gives us great excitement at the SBA in terms of what we can do to help propel small businesses.
Yeah, the idea of using government procurement as a way to sort of help direct the economy, that's really interesting. Of course, we just heard from one of the entrepreneurs who was in exactly that space, GovTech, with the government as a client for her technology business. Tell me a little bit about you've alluded a little bit to some of the changes that the pandemic might have, not the immediate crisis of the pandemic, but the long-term effects of the pandemic might have for small businesses. And it's obviously a little bit early. We're still in the pandemic. We're still facing Omicron right now. But I think we all sort of sense that the world's going to be a different place when we come out of the pandemic. Business is going to be different. Entrepreneurship is going to be different. And do you have any hypotheses about how things might be different and how, is that guiding the SBA's strategy?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, I've talked a lot about technology, but I think, e-commerce and the adoption of technology and everything from operations to growing markets and social media to market, I think that's really going to hopefully change small businesses forever into the future. And the fact that we're behind the rest of the world in many respects around e-commerce, but really have an opportunity to lean in and grow is really important. And I know that so many businesses really rethought how they were approaching digital tools and adopted them at really high rates, and said that that saved their businesses. And I know that that's been referenced earlier as well. But e-commerce has surged and was up 39% in the first quarter of 2021 versus 2020. And we see that I think it was 10 years worth of growth in that first quarter. So it's pretty remarkable. I do think that that's going to change. And so as a result, I recently launched and I'm rolling out the Small Business Digital Alliance, which is going to be a partnership with the SBA and Business Forward with large technology companies and technology companies broadly to help businesses adopt technology through, of course, trainings and webinars, and also free tools to be able to help small businesses during this time transition to a more digital world and be able to better leverage social media for their growth. So we do want to lean into expanding those tools and of course, including on the other side, cybersecurity to protect them. But I also see a lot of changes in terms of the way we're investing in economies of future as well. I think innovation and those innovative startups, science and technology-based firms, there are so many opportunities, of course, with the investments in climate change and investments that we're making, not only through the bipartisan infrastructure law, but just hopefully in future Build Back Better and other considerations in Congress today that will really help us advance innovation or research and commercialization. And of course, the SBA powers the Small Business Innovation Research grants that the federal government, large agencies, research agencies use. And I think those are non-dilutive programs that businesses can access to advance their research. And also it's a pathway to the government contract as well. It gives you a straight line into federal contracts. I think that, in the innovation space, I think we'll see great change from our small businesses into the future, and more support for especially our women and people of color as they enter into these fields, I think is needed. And that's something we want to lean into with also venture capital and our small business investment companies that we have in statute currently. We have about 300 around the country, and they also leverage the federal government to invest in small businesses, but not enough venture. And so we really want to try to transform that to help the future innovators who are going to be addressing a lot of these crises I referenced earlier, especially climate change.
Are there ways that the SBA, it's an interesting set of, you have so many different avenues in which you're trying to help the small business ecosystem. And I'm wondering about there's the new business creation and trying to have a dynamic, get new businesses off the ground in these new areas of climate or other areas, and then there's helping businesses grow. And that's scaling. The question of how do you scale is one that's so salient for Latino businesses. Jerry Porras, in his earlier remarks, made the observation that Latinos are creating businesses at much higher rates than the rest of the population, but most of the businesses have not scaled. That is, they're under $1 million, say, in revenue. How are you approaching the issue of trying to help small businesses get bigger, grow, to get to this scaled the point that we're also trying to do in our educational program at a smaller scale?
Most definitely. I mean, I think that I referenced, some of the programs that the SBA has. I mean, we're all about, creating those capital programs that will really help businesses take advantage of those growth opportunities. So we do think a lot of it lies in making sure that they're funded and help them do what they do best, which is, ideate and create these businesses that can propel them. And so whether it's the loans or the investment programs or that non-dilutive funding that's available through the Small Business Innovation Research grants, we want to make sure that there are pathways and that businesses can easily navigate federal government. And part of the American Rescue Plan included a community navigators pilot program, which was able to fund a network of navigators across the country to help businesses connect to the ecosystem and to the resources, either directly through SBA or other partners on the ground. And so we are really excited about that program. And in fact, it's led by one of your former SLAE staff members, Mark Madrid. He's my associate administrator for the Office of Entrepreneurial Development. And we're looking to make sure that we have those entry points for small businesses, as well as a pathway to stronger development as they grow their businesses. The navigators are really about inclusion and making sure that our small businesses can thrive. And we're glad that one of the spokes of this hub and spoke network is SLAE, and that we can continue to partner with you on the ground to make sure that we're growing businesses. And it is everything from the everyday businesses, Main Street businesses, manufacturing, to those innovative startups. And I think that tailoring those programs to make sure that we have something customized to meet our businesses where they are is what's really important, and what Mark is trying to consider as we develop our continuum of offerings around entrepreneurial development, and that what my team is looking at in terms of capital and market access as well. But I think that, regardless of the programs that we can create, it really is about building these partnerships and community, and leveraging the existing resources that are out there to help connect businesses to the plethora of resources that are available.
I love that you acknowledge Mark, and we're known to many of us here in this event, and to people who've been through the program before, we're very, very proud of him for his service to the country and working with you. I got a question about the technology. So many small businesses are inherently local businesses. They need a physical presence. They're a retail business or a on the ground business, but there's also a lot that aren't businesses where people are now remote. Do you think we're going to see more small businesses that have distributed workforces in the future because of technology? We've all gotten used to being on the internet like this. How do you think that might change the landscape for small businesses?
Yeah, I'm so glad we've had an opportunity to talk about these subjects, because I do think SBA already through its networks plays a role in trying to support small businesses with workforce and these challenges they're facing. And you alluded to it earlier, just the right now, especially small businesses are really challenged to access workforce. And we've considered various programs that can better align our small business development centers, our navigators, our women's business centers across the board, so that they are supportive of small businesses in addressing these challenges. And whether that's finding the technology to deal with this dispersed workforce that is going to exist on an increasing basis, especially in certain sectors, to helping support them in terms of dealing with creating a safe workplace environment if they are manufacturers or others that have more folks on site and in facilities. So we are trying to branch out further within our networks to make sure that we're offering that expertise to be able to support businesses in their decision. I mean, I think that the bottom line is that we're not the experts in that area, but we of course can help small businesses as the voice of small business connect to resources and make sure that from a policy perspective at the federal government that we're considering all these new issues that small businesses will have to face in managing dispersed workforces, perhaps across states, which of course, as larger businesses know, can get challenging. So we will continue to try to figure out ways to support them.
Yeah, one thing I think is some of the effects of the pandemic, whether it's been moving to remote or just trying to deal with health issues and so forth. In a larger organization, you have to sort of figure it out, and then if you have a large organization, you can scale it to a large organization. But small business, you've got to do all that work to figure out how to do the adaptation or whatever it is, move remote and so forth. And you've got to do all the same things that a giant organization has to do, but you're a smaller number of people, and that just strikes me as such a challenge over the last 2 years, and could be to some extent carrying forward a bit in the future if more technology is being needed and so forth.
I think definitely. I mean, we've seen it. Of course, we're managing that in the federal government in terms of our own ability to, to work with a more dispersed workforce and more remote workforce, and contemplating return to work. And so I do think these are big issues that small businesses have to face. And I think that what has been proven, though, is that there's more opportunity to perhaps expand into markets with a more dispersed workforce and take advantage of some of the benefits of having to face those decisions and those changes. So I think there's positives and there's challenges as well. But I know that small businesses are just, especially I think in the research you show with Latino small businesses, willing to find strategies and adapt to this new environment and what the workforce is really demanding in many instances.
Yeah, I love the sort of looking for the positive there. And it has been, I think the adaptability of the entrepreneurs who've been through our program is one of the most inspiring things we've seen over the last couple of years. We're close to the end, but there's one point I thought I'd love to ask you just to sort of close, which is about you, which is that you're getting close to your 1-year anniversary. President Biden just hit his 1-year anniversary in office. And I think everyone here's a leader of an organization. I think they would love to hear you reflect on a little bit, if you'd be willing, on what you've learned in the last year running this giant organization through this incredibly challenging time, and sort of how you're thinking about the future, having been through this experience.
Mm-hmm. I do have to say, I think, of course, we all believe this, but your team is just so important and critical. And, the SBA is really full of some very mission focused individuals who just have a passion for our work, for small business, for helping build resilient communities as well, since of course the SBA is heavily involved in disaster as well, with disaster lending. But we, having that incredible team has really been invaluable. Bringing in folks like Mark Madrid, experts with this new perspective and new insights, and especially those who are able to lead with diverse mindset and having a vision for what the changing face of entrepreneurship is going to mean on our programs and to government innovation. I think that I lead everything as from a very entrepreneurial perspective. I've told my team I want them to be as entrepreneurial as the small businesses and adapt and pivot, which is how we've been able to, refine some of our programs that I walked into. And I'm willing to consider change and correct for flaws, and be able to, especially as we see when we launch at the federal government, we don't launch in the target market. We launch at scale, nationally, completely inclusive. And so, there's lots of iterations that have to happen to make sure that we are truly serving all of our nation's entrepreneurs. But I think that has been, of course, something I was aware of, but it's really been profound to see it in action, especially during this time where in President Biden's first year, we put out $500 billion, and that was tremendous, and a lot of it in grant programs that we've never administered before. And so being able to quickly dive into the customer experience and human-centered design to be able to really try to help create programs that work for our entrepreneurs and adopt technology and create equity, especially in our outreach. I think those have been learning experiences that hopefully will serve SBA well as we move into the future. But I couldn't have done any of it without my incredible team. And I think what really gives me hope is, as well, is the diversity and the equity and inclusion that President Biden has led with. I mean, of course, I'm part of the most diverse cabinet in the history, and I think that makes a difference. I think being able to bring those diverse perspectives and that voice, especially on the economic lens, as SBA administrator, really matters for our country and to solving some of those challenges and opportunity gaps that we all talk about. And I'm really, truly honored to be able to be in this position and be able to bring to bear all the experiences that I've had in entrepreneurship or in government in California or at the federal level to really try to position the SBA in the future. And so I do think, I value that ability to be agile and adaptable that comes from my early days and my growth as the daughter of an entrepreneur.
Well, thank you for all the work you're doing on behalf of the country and on behalf of entrepreneurs and small business owners everywhere, and especially Latino entrepreneurs and the folks on this at this event. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate it. We know you've got thousands and thousands of businesses across the country to worry about, and it really means a lot that you've made the time to be here with us this afternoon. And good luck with the executing on the inspiring vision that you've just laid out for us about what you're going to accomplish over the next few years in DC and for the country.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to continuing to track all your work. And I wish I could have been there in person, and hopefully be back in California next year.
You've got an open invitation, and next time we'll do it in person. We'd love to have you at Stanford and host you.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we've reached the end of the program, and I'm going to turn it over to Victor Arias to close the program. Victor is the chairman and the co-founder of the Latino Business Action Network, which is the key partner in the SLAY program. And Victor has been involved right from the very start of SLAY and is an incredible contributor to the program throughout, and as well as to Stanford. So Victor, with that, I'll turn it over to you to close the program.
Thank you, Dean Levin. And wow, just a great program. Dean, thank you for your continued support of this program. You've been there from the very beginning as well. Administrator Isabela Casillas Guzman, first of all, I love saying that name like that, but thank you so much for all your service to our country and for our community. We are very proud that Mark Madrid is working for you. I think we trained him a little bit better for you. So we're very happy that he's there with you and contributing and helping our country. We are just so delighted that both of you have continued to support and to talk about the importance of the Latino demographic as the engine of this U.S. economy. And so we're just being very clear about this, that we are the drivers, the Latinos are the drivers of this country's continued growth. And so thank you both again. Many thanks to all of you that have shown up here. I think Jennifer mentioned you all, the many of you, the hundreds of you that are on here, many and some from out of the, from out of this country. And so we want to thank you all for joining us. This has been great for you to have seen, hopefully, our not only this last group, the fireside chat, but the last panel, which was led by our fearless Latina leader, Jennifer Garcia, and then also our incredible entrepreneurs to Leanna and Danielle and to Paola. I mean, you are the representatives. You are the, our joy here. You're the testaments to the work and the value of the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Education Program. We're just very proud of you, and we expect you to continue your trajectory in creating more wealth, more jobs, and more leadership in this country. Next, tremendous findings on this 7th release of the State of Latino Entrepreneurship Report. Dr. Marlene Orozco, we are so blessed to have you on this team. Thanks again to Jonathan, who's joined us recently, and then also to Inara Tarek, who was with us for a long time, not with us anymore, but clearly her fingerprints are in this report as well. And a special thanks to Paul Oyer, who is our SLAY faculty advisor and part of our board. And also for the opening remarks by Mark Tessier-Levine, president of Stanford University. I also want to add my condolences to the Arriaga family. For John, he will, he won't be with us, but he will never be forgotten. So I want to just add those condolences. SLAY is the driving force of the Latino and Latino Business Action Network is the key collaborator for this, as Dean Levin mentioned. And we raise money through sponsorships, through corporations, through foundations, individuals, and our esteemed board of directors. And we are led by Arturo Cáceres, who has done a phenomenal job in his short tenure here. So we're just very thankful for that. Finally, mucho respeto and cariño to our co-founder and leader, to Jerry Porras. He has shown the very grit, determination, and commitment to excellence that all our alums really require for their own businesses. So he is the perfect role model for success and for giving back. And so, Jerry, we are incredibly grateful to you. What a great afternoon. So on behalf of the entire team at LBAN, the board, the staff, SLAY, and Stanford, thank you all. We hope to see you face to face so we can give you those abrazos and the hugs. And hopefully maybe this summer we can see you all. We'll see what happens with this crazy pandemic. But in the meantime, please stay safe. Thank you. Adelante, and go Stanford.